I am going to show you in this video how to create a VPC small lab for playing with the exercise related to VPC lateral movement that I had shared in my previous video. So this was the video related to AWS Red Teaming training, and in this video we had discussed about the VPC lateral movement. So everything is explained, what is VPC, what kind of component is there, and how to do the lateral movement. But the lab creation was not discussed here. So I am going to create a video for creating a lab, this VPC lateral movement lab manually, and then you can play with the VPC lateral movement exercise. So let's jump to the console and start creating a VPCs. I am going to perform all of this exercise in US East 2 region. So this demo will be hosted in US East 2 region. So what are we going to do? We will be creating two VPCs. Let me show the drawing to you. This was the scenario that we were playing with VPC lateral movement in the previous video. So we had two VPCs and there were three subnets, and these two VPCs were not able to communicate to each other. That's why we had created the that's why there was a VPC peering connection. So this is the same scenario that we are going to deploy as a lab in our AWS environment, and then you can play with the red teaming exercise. So just one thing to keep in mind is the IP addresses or the VPC ID, subnet ID will be different, instance ID from the video that I had shared previously. But otherwise the scenario is going to be the same. We will be creating two VPCs, three subnet, and two subnet will be placed in VPC 1, and then there will be one private subnet will be placed in VPC 2. And of course the public subnet in VPC 1 will have the internet connection. So let's jump into the console and start creating VPC. So click on VPC, or you can simply just type here in a search bar VPC and it will take you to this dashboard. So let it load. There is a default VPC, okay. We will rename that default VPC as VPC 1, and we will be creating one more VPC as a VPC 2. So each region, when you logged into any region, there will be a default VPC. Not sure, this is slow. Let's wait for this to load. Okay, so click on VPC, or you can also click on create VPC. It's loading, and now as you can see that there is one VPC which is default VPC. Let's rename this VPC as a VPC 1 as part of our previous drawing, VPC 01, and now this is the VPC 01 that we have. We need to create one more VPC, and before we create one more VPC, let's check the subnet that this VPC has. So we can go to the subnet here. We can also check that in a VPC. So currently there are three subnets which are starting with 172.31 range. So as part of our exercise, we only need two subnet. So what I am going to do is delete the additional subnet. Let's delete this subnet. Go to action, delete the subnet, type delete. So now we have two subnet in VPC 1 as we saw in a drawing. We will create one more VPC which is VPC 2, VPC 02, and then we are going to define a range. So the range that we will be configuring is 10.20.0.0/16. So this is our subnet range. So anything in a subnet that we have to configure under this VPC will start with 10.20. Then you can type your own prefix here. Okay, so this is going to be a range for us, and let me click on create. Okay, so now we have two VPCs. So this one VPC has few subnets, like two subnet, and VPC2 doesn't have any subnet right now. Okay, and then there is a route table attached to this VPC also is there. So if we refresh, we will see all of the details. So now this route table is also populated. So let's go to the subnet, create one more subnet and give the name. Okay, let's name this subnet first from the VPC1. So let's say that we will be using this 0.0 subnet for our public instance, and another subnet we will be using for our private instance. So I will be saying VPC01 public subnet. Okay, then the name is public because when we create the instance, we will be assigning public IP to that instance, and at the same time it will also have the private IP address attached to it from this CIDR block. So this is our VPC01 public subnet, and this will be our VPC01 private subnet. Okay, so these are the two subnet that we have in one VPC. Now we are going to create one more subnet which will be part of VPC2. So when we create a subnet, we need to select the VPC. So VPC2 we are going to select, and then subnet name I will give VPC02 private subnet. This is how you will create the subnet, and then availability zone, let's not select any preference, let it decide on its own. So since this is 10.20 subnet, our IP address subnet range will start from 10.20. Okay, if we try to create 21.1.0/24 subnet, we will be getting the error. So keep in mind that this should match our CIDR block that we have defined when we were creating the VPC. So let's say this will be our 10.20.1.0 subnet in this VPC, and then create the subnet. Okay, so now we have three VPCs, three subnets here. These two subnet are part of VPC1, and then this subnet is part of VPC2. Okay, as you can see, the CIDR IP block also is mentioned here. So next what we are going to do is create a EC2 instance in this same region. We are going to create a 3 EC2 instances. Okay, let it load. Okay, so currently we do not have any EC2 instance. Let me click on instance and see. Okay, there are no instance, so let's launch an instance. And the first instance that we have to create is will be part of VPC01 public subnet, because this is where we will have the public IP address for this instance. So let me give the name. I will be naming it as a VM01 VM02 and 03, just for the sake of simplicity. So this is VM01 that we have, and we will be selecting the Ubuntu AMI, and then scroll down. Sorry for this slow loading things. I don't know why this is loading slow, but let's wait and let this finish. So okay, this is Ubuntu that I have selected. We will be selecting the free tier eligible AMI, and then scroll down. Now you need to select the instance type. We will be selecting the again free tier eligible instance type. Okay, so this is the T2 micro that we are going to select, which is by default came, and then we have to create the key pair. So let's create a new key pair. So if you are going to SSH this instance from Linux or Mac OS, use the .pem format, and if you are going to SSH into this instance, use the .ppk format. Okay, so the key name that I am going to give is VPC lab. Okay, and we will be using this same key across all of our 3 instances. So this is just the first EC2 instance that we are going to create the key pair. Okay, this is the key pair we have created, and in the networking setting, make sure that this instance is part of VPC01, and then the subnet info, go to edit here, and also make sure that the subnet is VPC1 subnet will be our public subnet, this first subnet. Okay, because in the backend the private IP from this 172.31.0.0 subnet will be assigned to this instance, and of course we need the public IP address, that's why this is enabled. And for the remaining 2 instances we are going to keep this as a disabled. And now here, coming to security group, what you can do is you can create 3 different security group for 3 different instances. So I am going to give name of this security group is public SG, and then there will be 2 private security group, okay, that we are going to create for, one for the instance in private subnet of VPC1 and the one for instance in private subnet of VPC2. And we will be allowing the access of SSH and HTTPS, okay, not source. We will allow SSH from everywhere. Add rule, we will add one more rule, custom TCP port 443, okay, and that's it. So this is about security group. And next we are going to keep the storage as a same 8 GB, and that's it. Okay, so let's, okay, I think this is, we need to take it a little bit here, and then here you can see the launch instance. Okay, click on launch instance. Now the instance will be launching. Okay, so there is some error, we need to fix this. So it is going to allow this port 443 access from all of the IP addresses. So we are opening 443 for all of the IP addresses. Click on launch instance and see here what's happening. Now while this instance is launching, we will create 2 more instances. So okay, let's see this progress and make sure that first instance is launching properly, and then we are going to quickly create a remaining 2 EC2 instance. Okay, so our instance has been launched successfully. You can click here and see the instance related detail. Okay, while this is loading, okay, it's loaded. So this is our VM01. If you look at this instance here, you will see that it has a public IP address that's got assigned, and the private IP address is from the range of the subnet that we have chosen. So these are the details. You can also look at the security, and then you will see the security group name that we had assigned to this. Okay, so this instance is initializing, and this is our security group. So let it initialize. While this is initializing and finishing the status check, we will be creating 2 more instances. So let's launch one more instance. Give the instance name VM02. Select the Ubuntu from here bottom. Scroll down. This will be our free tier eligible AMI. And then now what we are going to do, the security, the key pair that we had created for our previous instance, we are going to use the same here. Okay, this instance type will come here automatically. Let's give it some time to load. Ideally it doesn't take this much time, it will be immediately shown, but for some reason I am facing some issue. So no worries, let's focus on next thing, which is selecting the key pair. So okay, that instance type has came here. Select the key pair of VPC lab that we had created previously, and the next thing that we have to do is edit the network setting and make sure that this instance is also part of VPC1, and subnet will be private subnet. And for this subnet we are not going to assign public IP address, that's why this should be disabled. And security group, we will be naming this group as a not default group, we will be creating a new security group, and then the name will be private 01SG, because there will be 2 private subnet, one will be in VPC1 and one will be in VPC2. So that's why I am naming this like naming the security group like this. Okay, let me just add one more rule. What we can do, you can actually play with these rules if you want, not to add any specific rule or allow full access. You can simply just do it here, all traffic, and then it will allow all the traffic. So let's now, our instance configuration is done. Let's click on launch instance and let it launch. Okay, while this is launching, we are going to create one more instance, and the last part will be to create the peer connection between VPCs and check the routing. By the way, routing and all details are already explained in a red teaming video. This video is specifically for how to create these resources as part of our lab. So let's launch an instance. Okay, this is done. Close the tab. Let's close this tab as well. Okay, it's very slow. Okay, our last VM will be VM03, and this EC2 instance will be part of VPC3. Okay, sorry, VPC2 private subnet. Select the Ubuntu here. Next, instance type, it will come here automatically from the free tier eligible group, and then we are going to select the same key pair which we had selected previously for our previous 2 instances. So this is just a repetitive thing, but now here what we need to make sure is this is part of different VPC, not the VPC one. Okay, while this is loading, let me edit the VPC network setting, and then here I am going to select VPC2, and then it's coming automatically the private subnet. And let's also make sure that this private 02SG has a full network ports open. You can open all the network ports. Let me select here all traffic, and let's scroll up again to see if now we can have a look at key pair. Let me create, cancel, and then see again here. Okay, let it take time. So this is the setting that is completed. Now only thing that we have to do is wait for this key pair name to show here. Or let me do one thing. If it is taking too long, it will not take this long for you. You can simply reuse the previous key, but I am going to create one more key here, which is, let's say, test. And then again what you have to make sure is if you are using this key for the Linux or Mac OS operating system, use the .pem format, and for the Windows you need to use .ppk format. Create the key pair, and then now I am going to just click launch instance because all the settings are done. So now we have launched the instance. Okay, so all of our 3 instances are ready, and our 2 VPCs and 3 subnets, those are also ready. Now the only pending thing is we need to create the routing, and we also need to create the VPC peering connection. So go to the instance, just make sure that our 3 instances are here. Okay, the third one is pending, but if you click on first, you will see the first instance detail here. If you click the second instance, and the details will be here, because there is no public IP, of course you will not see here, there is only private IP address. And the third instance will also have only private IP address, which is this 10.20 subnet. And that's all from the instance perspective. Now let's jump to the VPC. Let me open it in a different window. VPC. We are going to create a peer connection first, peering link, and then we will add the routing. Okay, so this has came. These are our 2 VPCs here. Let's go to peering connection. First, create a peering connection here, click on here, and then we need to create a peering from VPC1 to VPC2, and let's give it a name as VPC to VPC, just some name that we can identify. You need to select the requester VPC. It can be VPC1 or 2, doesn't matter. Just select one here, and then you will see the CIDR subnet for this VPC. And now you can select where is the another VPC. So of course it can be from another account as well, but since it's in our account, we are going to keep this default. Select the VPC2, and then you can simply create a peering connection by clicking on this link. Next, when you create a peering connection, you need to approve this connection. Okay, so here is the action button. Until and unless you don't approve, it will not be communicating to each other. So let's accept this request. Let take it a little bit here. This is the request detail. VPC1 is a requester and acceptor VPC will be VPC2. So when we create a peering connection, the communication will be bidirectional from VPC1 to 1 to 2 and VPC2 to VPC1. Communication will be there by default once the routing is in place. So VPC peering connection is done. Let's go to the route table and make sure that we have the routing in place also. So for the VPC2, we will also name the route table. Let's say RT VPC02. This is VPC02. And then for the VPC01, just make sure that this is VPC01. RT VPC01. Okay, let me change this name again and make it properly. RT. So this is the route table. Now what we have to do is from the VPC1, just make sure that we have the route towards VPC2, which is 10.20 subnet. Click on the routes. As you can see that VPC1 has route towards internet and towards its local subnets. We need to add one more route which will be pointing towards our VPC peering connection, and that route will be for VPC2. Add the route here, and the destination subnet will be 10.20.0.0. You can, if you want to be very precise, you can just keep 1.0/24 here. Okay, or you can keep 0.0/16, which is part of this second VPC full subnet. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's be very precise and create 1.0/24. And then the next hop will be target. I mean, when this VPC needs to send traffic to 10.20 subnet, it will be sending traffic to peering connection. And now because our peering connection has been created already, we are seeing the pop-up here. So let's select this and save the changes. Okay, so now as you can see that there is an additional route added here in VPC1. Same we have to do in a VPC2 routing table. Go back to routing table. This is VPC2 routing table. Go to the routes, and then as you can see that there is only one route available for the local connection. So edit the route table and add the route towards 172.31.0.0 subnet /16. Okay, I am going to keep /16 this time, and the peering connection will be same, and then just save the changes. So that's all guys from the creating the lab. So let's quickly review what we have created and then we will conclude the video. So there are two route tables. Route table 1, which has route to its own network and VPC and internet and VPC2, and the route table 2 has route to its own network and then VPC1. And we have the peering connection here that we created. Next we have our two VPCs that we have created, and in the VPC the last thing that we need to check is our subnets. So we have 3 subnets, and name the subnet properly. So while doing exercise you can make out properly that this is the which subnet. And last thing is our EC2 instances that we need to take a look at. So this is instance 1, okay, which has public IP address. This is instance 2. This has private IP address of 31.21, and this is our instance 3, which again has a private IP address of 10.20 subnet, which will be part of VPC2. So that's all guys from the lab creation perspective. I hope you like this video and this has been informative for you. If you have any question, get in touch with me. I will be happy to answer you. With that being said, thank you very much guys for watching the video. See you.